Hey everybody, it's Stu Smith and Jeff Nichols, and we are doing the Tactical Fitness Report. This one is a special one. This is our grand finale of our athletes and body types that are preparing for buds. And so we're going to mix in a few different athletes in this group that are fairly similar. But I think we'll just brush through them. You've kind of seen some of the other ones we talked about. You know what you need to do with your strengths and weaknesses and work all those things out. So we're just going to kind of talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses that these guys bring, and then, talk about how they can get, better to get to and through the training. But first, we're going to start a little bit different today because we've been getting a lot of questions of things to talk about. And the one that Jeff and I just got a big kick out of was esports, if there is such a thing. I read the word esports and I was like, what the hell is esports? And I had to figure it out, but it's actual video games. There's no such thing as a video game athlete. Let me just tell you that. You might be an athlete that play video games, but there's no such thing as a video game athlete. So let's tell that story you were just telling me prior to, Jeff, especially about the,
esports. The summary story I'll touch on this is we were gonna do this as like the dumb questions yin, but then we had a follow-on sort of conversation about a bit of a red flag on this guy. So I had gotten through selection at the command I came from, and I had gone back to the West Coast to finalize my move my goods across the country. And I stopped in to see a very good friend of mine who's a head athletic trainer at Warcom there. And I just happened to be in there saying hi. And then the command master chief from Buds at the time was in there getting rehab on his back or something. We were just having conversation. And when I showed up at Buds, and I think it still is the case, you're going to fill out a questionnaire of name, address, next of kin. I mean, you've kind of already done that within the Navy, but the Buds center has their own file, so they're not having to deal with thick service records and stuff. It's like quick reference. But one of those questions in there is where did you first see or hear or know of SEALs? And for me, it was I met a Vietnam SEAL when I was a kid, and it was just kind of very cool. But nowadays, now mind you, this was 10 years ago, but I'm assuming based off of the frequency of books, movies, and video games, it's probably similar. Is that the number one answer to where did you first hear or know about SEALs was video games. And they started drawing a correlation between people answering that way and completion of Buds. And the Master Chief was like, anybody that answers the question the first time I heard about a SEAL was a video game, it's like they never make it through Buds. Now, is that always and never? It was a conversation, but it was a conversation worth mentioning to this group here because my son plays video games. I'll play them with him sometimes and those sort of things because it's a mindless task that is sometimes good for the brain. But if you're sitting in your mom's house eating Cheerios, drinking Mountain Dew in your white dirty underwear, hoping to be a SEAL someday, you might want to put the controller down and go get a gym membership. Yeah. So that's really my soapbox speech on that. Don't give me esports Yeah, that's like arguing. That's like trying to convince me that the sky is purple.
Yeah, like I said when I started off this segment was there's no such thing as a video game athlete, right? So, and you do need to get out there, obviously, and do some other things. So I don't have anything to say to that one. We're just
going to leave that one there because I think that one will digest itself.
Yeah, it's fun to play video games. I won video game tournaments when I was a kid. Now, this was the 80s, back before I could play them in my house. I actually had to put a quarter in an arcade.
Yeah.
But I won tournaments, Pac-Man tournaments, Donkey Kong tournaments. I mean, you name it. I tore those things up, right? Asteroids, I could tear it up, right? But anyway, but I played sports and I worked out all the time too. Eventually, you get tired of playing all these video games, and it can eat up some time. It can waste some time, and you could definitely spend your time doing better things. So, moving on.
Yep.
So, we've had a lot of people talking about their particular sports, and we understand. Baseball was one, hockey was one, rowing was one. There might have been a few others, but I think we're just going to try to combine all these into one show and, probably put hockey and baseball together because they're fairly similar, right? Fairly similar in their
a lot of lateral movement.
A lot of lateral movement, hand-eye coordination.
Different positions.
Yeah, different positions that require different skill sets. Jeff and I were talking about I was a catcher, he was a catcher. There's a lot of catchers, that seem to do pretty well in the SEAL teams for some reason.
Yeah.
Or goalies.
Yeah, there was
goalies.
In the squadron that I came from, there was 4 of us were Division I catchers. And then some of the, like one of the JOs in my buds class was a hockey in college, good one at a big school in Minnesota, and is still an officer and just took over as CO over one of the teams, and such a good dude. And he, as far as I'm concerned, he kicked buds in the ass.
Yeah. So anyway, there's some skill sets, obviously some positions in different sports may require, I don't know, maybe a little more toughness to be it. I mean, because you're always bruised, you're always ached, something hurts on you. You're in a bad position. And I grew up in Florida, so I was always sweating through my gear, and just disgusting. So there's some getting comfortable being uncomfortable, I think, in some of these positions. Hockey is one of those things when it's nothing worse than, well, there are obviously things that are worse, but putting on a pair of wet pads for a second time in a day, or they're still wet from the day before and they stink. Yeah, that's gross,
Yeah. But if you've ever been in a hockey locker room, it's a hockey locker room. I mean, it's we've all kind of, many of us have been in football locker rooms, and it's much in the same, but there's something to be said about hockey on ice, that extra moisture, man.
Yeah. It reeks.
It's tough to dehumidify a hockey locker room.
Yeah. And
manage to do it most of the time in football. Like, I've never been in a stinky pro locker room, NFL.
Yeah.
I've been in 9. I've been in 9 NFL locker rooms. They never stink.
Yeah.
I've been in a handful of NHL locker rooms, and they stink. Just like they do the college hockey rooms. Okay? So I don't know why. They just do.
Like I said, one of those things, we make fun about the stinkiness of these things, and it's just uncomfortable. You get used to those things, and, it's the little things that don't bother you that I think is very helpful when trying to get through buds.
Yeah.
Because if you don't care if you have sand in your pants and you have blisters on your feet and, all these little things that can drive some people crazy and say, I'm done. I can't handle this discomfort.
Yeah.
Those are the type of things that I think these sports do really well at preparing you, for the training.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough. Like we probably could have done a video on each, but what you're going to see is, like Stu already said, is, baseball, hockey, and rowing crew, we could have put them in rugby potentially. We could have, but we kind of looked at them as like, crew's kind of its own little animal, but at the same time, we've already kind of covered the information. We're just making sure we can fulfill some of the requests that we've said. Hey, leave comments and we'll get to it. And but baseball and hockey, kind of, the upside we're looking at is there's a tremendous amount of agility involved in those two sports. Not that there isn't other, but these two in particular. And so we look at it and go from like an O-core standpoint, but also where hockey and baseball, not only are they very heavy in the sense of using lower extremity work, which is pretty much all sport.
Yeah.
Even crew, since you're seated, but a lot of, from a hockey standpoint, a baseball standpoint, from a tactical shooting standpoint, decision-making standpoint, because the puck and the ball, baseball is moving so quickly. Not that all sports aren't, but these two sports are very high skill, reaction oriented sports. And that really bodes well in the tactical space, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, think about what you're doing there before every play, right? Before you get that ball, you are always asking yourself, what am I going to do when I get that ball? Right? How many outs are there? Your situational awareness of just the inning or the period of what that you're in, those things transform very well, not just at buds, but beyond buds. you know, with your decision making and stuff. So I think those are some great intangibles. I will say this, out of the three, if we're comparing the three, the crew guys are endurance athletes off the chart.
Yep.
I mean, the other two guys, two sports have nowhere near the amount of endurance the crew guys do. And even though it's a non-impact sport of rowing, all those guys do is run. They run their ass off. I mean, I see them at Navy all the time.
Cruising.
Oh, my God.
Nick, and, you know, they may not be very good at pressing, but here's, again, the caveat to that is that when you have a really strong back, pressing will come really fast.
Yeah.
I think it was John Welburn from Power Athlete, a good buddy of mine and a former NFL player. He was in the first CrossFit game. He was 300 pounds. Ooh. You know, he was just an NFL guy. He was a lineman. Wow. And anyway, he was always like, someone asked him once on his podcast, he goes, something about bench pressing. And he's like, and John's like, kind of like me, he's a bit of a smart ass. And he goes, you ever seen a man that can bench press 400 pounds with a small back? The guy was like, no. He goes, they get a big, strong back. Yeah. So it's not about bench pressing so much, but really I look at it, when you have a really, really strong back, through and through, a strong posterior chain, you don't see a lot of incidents of shoulder issues.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because, you think about it. You know, your typical lifter is only worried about the front side of his body.
Yeah.
Right? They're worried about, all they do is bench press and push-ups and dips, and, they're internally rotated. You are not internally rotated when you're a rower.
You are not.
You got the best posture. In fact, you're probably even a little bit externally rotated a little bit.
Very possible, yes.
And so your back's that strong.
Yep.
I will say this, pull-ups, not a problem for the rower.
Not a problem, yeah.
Not a problem. I've seen 230-pound heavyweight crew guys that could do 30, 35 pull-ups.
Yeah.
No problem. But they couldn't bench press their body weight.
Yeah, and they couldn't do a lot of push-ups either.
Yeah.
But they will, once they get away from the sport of crew and they work into that resistance methodology, all of a sudden they're just crushing the push-ups.
Absolutely. Another weakness I've seen with hockey guys and some of the baseball players too is that they just don't run much, in their sport. So they are very susceptible to overuse running injuries, shin splints, knee tendonitis, aches and pains like that, if they don't do a progressive running program, over time. And they might have to spend some time, progressively building up their legs for that. Because, the hockey players' legs are some of the strongest legs I've ever seen.
Yes.
I can't burn them out. I can't out squat them. I can't out lunge them. But for some reason, we run anything over, a quarter mile, and they start limping with shin splints. I've worked with a few pro hockey players, and I realized, we can't do running as part of our workouts. I'm going to break these guys.
They're so laterally strong. Their vastus lateralis and glutes are so big from that lateral push. But the problem ends up being, people don't realize, and this is not a knock on hockey. It's big because the evolution of hockey, there's so many line changes that happen.
Yeah.
So it's not that they have fresh legs, but these guys are pure power, man.
Yeah.
90 seconds, they are on that ice crushing it, and then they're off.
Yep.
Sometimes a little bit longer, depends on who it is and so forth. But if you pay attention to hockey at all, a lot of times, because the camera work is so good and it follows the puck, you don't oftentimes see the hot line changes much. But again, kind of one of the similarities of like the drawback as well with hockey and baseball I look at that isn't so much the case in crew and rowing is that baseball, there's a lot of overuse injury with their shoulders. And then hockey, because there's a lot of contact, kind of similar with lacrosse, you might have a lot of discomfort potentially being overhead.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where from a baseball standpoint and a hockey standpoint, one of the things that's kind of one of the comments I made yesterday on live, and I believe this to be true fairly relatively across the board, is that it's always a good idea, and I rarely say always and never, but I think it's almost always a good idea to work on shoulder hypertrophy because it really aids in shoulder stability. I'm not saying, and what I mean specifically is I like to do, and I like to program lower weight, higher rep and volume for shoulder work.
Absolutely.
Because if you're going to press a little heavier or pull a little bit heavier or whatever, we want the shoulder to be the fulcrum and not the means for locomotion, like on a back workout.
Right.
I want to stabilize that shoulder. And that's what I find that I have to do a lot, or I emphasize more with baseball and hockey is like, let's really look on shoulder hypertrophy and back strength for these guys.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. Yeah, they're not really known, those two sports, baseball, hockey, are not really known to be great PTers.
Yeah.
Right. Upper body PT, high rep calisthenics, lifting. Yeah, they get into some lifts. Nothing crazy. No 1 rep max stuff typically, but they on the upper body. But it doesn't take long for them to transition into the pre-buds, ace in the PST field. The biggest problems they have is, 1, they need to practice swimming, and 2, they need to practice running. A little more.
Yeah, that seems to be, again, you guys hopefully seeing the unifying factor for many of these, aside from the swimmer, is that swimming tends to be one of those things that needs to be mostly focused on for all these athletes.
Yeah.
And that's just because not many coaches, you see it rarely, but not many coaches will use swimming as a conditioning modality for their athletes. If I was a Division I coach of any sport aside from swimming, one of my off-season and in-season recovery modalities would be swimming.
Absolutely, yeah.
And now I know that given like the university and what's been, like, let's say, for example, if I was a head strength coach at Navy, for example, because I do have an aquatic center, I would get my athletes in I would treat the Sunday and maybe a Monday post-football game much like I would treat walk week in Buds.
Yeah.
Right? Because we spent a week after Hell Week, not Buds.
Yeah.
A week after Hell Week, it was a walk week, but every day we spent 2 or 3 hours, and they actually turned the heat up in the combat training tank to where it was pretty freaking warm.
Yeah, I was sweating.
We never would cover it, but they would the rollbacks, the brown shirt rollbacks, and then the PTR class, every night they would cover the pool. So in the morning when we went there after breakfast, we'd walk to the pool, and we literally would just do stretch PT in the pool for an hour or 2.
Yeah, that's the best.
And I think that is one of the most amazing things that Buds has to offer, is you really have these really awesome forward-thinking doctors and Buds instructors and leaders at Buds doing these things. And I think that that's something that sport could learn from Buds for sure. They may not know they do it, but it's super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, water is the great equalizer, seems to be with all of these sports. I've seen great rowing athletes that are just cardio animals, running, PT, rowing, obviously. Yeah, I mean, rowing in a boat, that's a skill. When you're going to be in a boat a lot, you can probably be carrying it on your head mostly, which really sucks. But, when you're in a boat, at least you have an understanding of how to steer it, be the coxswain. There are some skills that rowing actually takes into it. Yeah. And I remember we had a guy in our boat crew that was a rower, and I mean, just little tips of, how to row, more efficiently, and, digging your shoulder into it, and, whatever, pulling with your back, all those things. And so, there are some skill sets that, the rower definitely brings to Buds.
Yeah, I would say too, not so we don't need to cover him a full athlete, but in the interest of saying, if we're comparing these three, what I would say is like, it's across the board. Stu and I keep saying be diverse. If I was a hockey athlete, I would need to run more and swim more potentially, but I'd also consider rowing some. Yeah. But I would also, for across the board, because it's such a fantastic sport in of itself, but it's not really worth mentioning in terms of transitioning to Buds, is paddleboarding.
Yeah.
What an
it's good
awesome sport. And for many, many reasons. But again, so that's my plug for you guys. If you guys want to experience a sport that really is a challenging but super valuable across the board, paddleboard. Yeah. Give it a shot.
Yeah. Make it, it's not that hard. It's not that hard on it. Yeah. Kayaking. Yeah. I mean, you can get winded a little bit, but you're going to feel it more in your core and shoulders, which, like I said, that's half the battle.
For sure.
You aren't going to be able to build your limbs very well unless you have a solid core and trunk. Sure. Think of a tree.
That's your foundation for sure.
That trunk is always bigger than the limb, so
you got to support the spine. Yep.
So there you go.
We talked kind of the positive and negatives. Now the mental side of it too, we can kind of touch on. I think is, baseball and hockey have their similarities because the interdisciplinary positions, right? As a catcher, for me, I could see everything and I was in control of everything and I called the game, and that boded well. That bode well for me when I got to the tactical population because I was very used to controlling and seeing and taking information. You see the same thing.
Communicating.
Exactly.
Communicating, yeah.
And that's kind of like baseball for me, and it's like this in every sport though, but just baseball, that historical nuance of those finite things in baseball, to me, that I really had to pay attention to, like situational from play to play, made sense to me. And you see that in hockey with the goalie or the captain, right? The forwards. You see that like with crew, you don't see it, but it's very, very prevalent. Especially with the coxswain or like some of I forget what the larger boats are, where you have someone at front calling out cadence and paying attention and making these shifts where you have this intense effort going on and you still have to make these finite adjustments. And so that's where those three on the mental side make a lot of sense for me because, I am fascinated with NASCAR, not because the cars go around the track, but what goes on in the pits, right? Yeah. That fascinates me about sport. And that's why I love all sports. And anytime I get a chance to see behind the curtain, I'm not necessarily watching like the play on the court or the field. I'm watching the interaction of the athletes, the coaches to the athletes. When there's a pause in play, I'm looking at it going, okay, they're up, there's an upswing, there's a downswing, how are we making adjustments? And that for me is the tactical population. Yeah. Because it's never just even.
Yeah, that's a good
There's
point.
always things going on in sport. And that's why I look at baseball, because you have 9 different positions. You have a round ball zinging around the field. You have a hockey puck going crazy. And you have people changing out positions. And then you have a crew of people locked into this boat, right, having to make decisions. We just look at it and go, how boring is this, guys? But if you've ever seen crew,
yeah, it's tight.
It's crazy, man, because you're seeing your competitors eye to eye. I think it's just awesome. That's why I love sport across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And anaerobically, I mean, those crew guys, I mean, they train so hard to get the endurance foundation to a point where they can peak to an anaerobic threshold of just busting it out, as a team too.
Yes.
I mean, because you can
got to be in sync, like I look at marching and, it's kind of crazy. You're not going to do any real marching at buds necessarily. I mean, you'll do that in boot camp. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed that cadence and that when you had somebody that was really good at calling out cadence.
Yeah. Could entertain
I really enjoyed marching, and that's why I kind of look at crew when you have to be in sync while you're producing that much force.
Yeah.
That's impressive. That's super impressive.
And, that is a great team work challenge for you too. I mean, you take teamwork to a different level when you're on a boat like that. And
I would be willing to bet if you took a really good crew team from Harvard, for example, because they're typically some of the best.
Yeah.
Right. And you put them in a real bud situation, log PT, they would crush it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're used to everything.
For what
everything's in sync. Yep.
Their communication, how they're in sync, their level of effort. I think that would be really impressive to see. And I'm almost sure that the U.S. Olympic rowing team is, because they're in.
Yeah, they've been there.
They've been there.
They've been to buds. Yep.
I bet you they do I bet they're, buds instructors probably aren't patting them on the back, but I bet you many of the buds instructors, I'm guessing, are going to go, these guys got their shit together.
Yeah.
And they probably do. I think that's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about baseball. My biggest thing, I think, real quick, strengths and weaknesses recap, more endurance,
Agreed.
cardiovascular endurance, muscle stamina. So, I mean, that's going to be a good cycle, several cycles of work for you, to transfer out of that. Hockey, very similar, a little more endurance, get used to running, get used to the load bearing of gravity, impact. Their strength, their legs are solid, shouldn't have a problem running in sand and things like that. That shouldn't be an issue for them. And then the crew guy pushing, their push muscles can get stronger. Yep. And then all three across the board, they've got to add swimming to their day. Otherwise, that's a great equalizer. So, and I think a lot of these sports that we've discussed are in the same zone as that, obviously. But we just wanted to share with you, and we're kind of closing up this series right now. We'll come up with some other idea, but just want to share with you that, like, all of these sports bring something to the table.
Yep.
Right. And, whether it's as basic as teamwork or it's just some kind of mental toughness skill that you've created, all those things are very valuable. And then obviously there are the specifics of buds that you have to start focusing on.
For sure. Yeah, I think my takeaway is that it's never a bad idea to serve our military, law enforcement, or fire. And it's also never a bad idea to have some variety in sport. And that's like the biggest, instead of going, because Stu's right on with like the positive and negatives, the negative across the board for this sport and every other sport is that if you're playing that sport primarily for years on end, you just need to add some diversity.
Yeah.
Right. Like for me, I played college, I played college baseball. I played baseball my whole life, but I swam pretty much my whole life and wrestled. But when I got out of college baseball, that's all I had done for 4.5 years. So I had to get some of my athleticism back.
Right.
I went back into jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, and I would practice because I was a strength coach. I'd actually practice with some of the other track team, and I threw a lot of javelin just because I just created some diversity. And so that's where, like what we're saying for like the high school athlete is, take some time off at the end of your graduation from high school for a year and do a little bit of everything. The same thing needs to happen, in my opinion, from you're graduating from college as an athlete. Give yourself that year to get some other athleticism, some skill back in. So we don't want you to be single-sided. I guess that's my summary.
That's really good. Yeah, and especially if you're a bigger athlete, you're probably going to lose some weight. If you're a smaller athlete, you're going to gain some weight. So all that stuff takes time. And once again, be patient. Buds is not going anywhere.
It certainly is not.
You can wait a year.
Yep.
And it's better to be fully prepared, because tell you what, you really won't see your full potential if you go there too early.
Agreed. It couldn't say better, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we Stu and I genuinely give a darn about this and what we do and try to help you guys. And that's probably the best advice any of us could ever give anyone is give yourself the best opportunity. And now we don't want you to put it off.
Right. Yeah.
But because there's never a perfect time. Like there's never, I'm perfectly ready. But if you give yourself 365 days to focus primarily on being prepared for the PST and buds, you will be better off having done that than just going, hey, college athlete, I'm graduating, I'm in the Navy in 3 months.
Yeah.
Give yourself, or high school for that matter.
Yeah.
So give yourself, be patient, like Stu said.
All right. Well,
now we'll jump into
we have two more athletes. We have two more athletes to discuss here. These kind of go in our stupid question box.
Yep.
But you go ahead, Jeff. You got your first.
So, and I this falls in the stupid question, not because of the implement so the question I got was, hey guys, could you cover the Kettlebell Athlete? Now I have met and done Pavel's course 3 different times. I really like kettlebells in every way, but it's the same thing as saying, hey, and again, this is not a negative statement towards CrossFit, but it just gives an example because it boxes it in saying, Well, is CrossFit going to prepare me adequately for buds? No. An aspect of high intensity interval training, CrossFit, certainly is necessary, in my opinion, throughout that training process. And same with kettlebells. They need to be used regularly, or the center mass bells from Sornex, or any sort of the supple slam ball, or the horse collar, right?
Tires.
But kettlebell as a sport, it's not quite video games, not even all, because it's physical, but you should be using kettlebells, yes. But kettlebell athlete to me it's not a word. It's not a phrase.
It is
competitively, yes.
Yeah.
But
it's no different than the master swimmer, a guy that just does master swimming for his workout.
Yeah.
365 days a year.
Yeah.
He's not diverse enough.
I get what he's saying, and the person isn't wrong, but I want you guys to go, again, that's why I say you shouldn't do bodybuilding. You shouldn't only do powerlifting. You shouldn't only do CrossFit. You should do them all.
Yes. Add it in there. Yeah.
Kettlebell falls in the all category. And if you've seen any of my programs, you will see it in it's almost a daily thing.
Yeah. Kettlebell swings, kettlebell snatches, Turkish get-ups.
Yeah, because here's where the kettlebell
farmer walks.
Farmer walks for sure.
Yeah, love them.
Load carriage. Here's where the kettlebell purist is going to lose their mind when I say this. The kettlebell purist is going to be appalled when I say you should be throwing the kettlebell. Now, very few kettlebells can withstand landing on the ground. The kettlebell needs to be made out of ductile iron, and there's only, as far as I know, there's only 2 companies that make it on their kettlebells. Sornex, all their kettlebells are ductile iron. They won't break. Even if you throw them on concrete, they won't break.
Wow.
Now,
break the concrete.
Don't throw it on, because we've done that. Yeah. We were I was at Sornex HQ, and we had a whole bunch of the competitor kettlebells and the Sornex ones of the same mass, and they were pendulum, and we were swinging them together.
Oh.
And the Sornex kettlebells broke every single one of them.
There you go.
Throwing them on iron. So I have a big backyard, and I throw my kettlebells and my center mass bells in my grass.
We throw them in the grass too. Yeah.
Beautiful. But a kettlebell purist is going to go, oh, you shouldn't do that to a kettlebell. And then they want to grab it and polish it. Right. But so I'm making fun of, because I do like the kettlebell. But folks, yes, kettlebells, they should be used, but not exclusively.
Yeah. I personally don't prefer those commie exercises. That's just me growing up in the cold.
If I may, I'm going to steal the show. Okay, so kettlebell, I just want to give you guys, because this is really cool. I'm a history guy, or at least pretend that I am. A kettlebell was never intended to be an exercise implement.
Nope.
In Russia, the 15th century, they were so you like the little scales, you put little weights on to measure like gold and stuff, like the little guys. That's what the kettlebells were. And the kettlebell handle used to be big, so you can put both hands in it. And the farmers would swing it up onto the scale because they were weighing like hay and produce, like heavy stuff. So they had to put these huge kettlebells, and then it became a bit of like an old strongman competition with the farmers. Would be like, yeah, this big old guy can swing this 100-kilo kettlebell up. And then basically it took the Russians, which are way more progressive, and the East Germans, to go, wait a minute, like these farmers are big, holy crap. And they're like, well, what are they doing? Well, these guys working these farmers working these farmer markets all day are swinging these kettlebells up. And these big forearms and big shoulders and big backs and big legs are like, huh. And so they started taking these kettlebells that were weights, right? They were scale weights. Yeah. They started putting them into their athlete programs, and like, boom.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really cool with kettlebells.
It is cool.
Kettlebells didn't come around 10 years ago. No. Kettlebells have been around for hundreds.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're real. I'm just teasing when I say.
Yeah, me too. But I just like history. It is. It's common.
Okay. So my last athlete of this series was a question. Hey, can you do one on the yoga athlete? I'm like, once again, I don't know there's such a thing. Right? If you're only doing yoga, you got a lot more to worry about. I mean, it's great to be flexible. It's great to be pliable and full range of motion of your joints, but, good core, that yoga can provide. But, you just got way too much to do. Now, introducing yoga and introducing kettlebells into your training program to get yourself to and through these selection programs. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. You got to stretch, you got to work mobility, you got to work flexibility. So yes, there is a place for them, but I can't classify the yoga athlete.
Again,
yeah.
And the thing is that the kettlebell and yoga, that's why we broke, ironically, we both got them the last day, but they fit in the category of they need to be part of it. But when someone thinks that that's the exclusivity of what their training should be, that for me is like a little bit scary, because again, like anything else, is like, if all I was doing was the bench, squat, and deadlift only exclusively, I'm going to have a lot of holes in my game, so to speak.
Right. I mean, it comes down to the FITS principle.
Yes.
Right. I mean, FITS, I mean, sometimes it's FITT. I've seen it both ways, but frequency of your workouts, intensity of your workouts, time, meaning days per week and hours per day, and then specificity. And that's the big one, especially for pre-buds and buds, because if you're not specifically doing things that you're going to be doing at buds, and there's no secret, you're going to be lifting logs, you're going to be lifting boats, you're going to be running, you're going to be swimming, going to be doing O courses, going to be doing a lot of PT.
Yep.
If your workouts don't look like that, you are not preparing for buds.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
There you go.
Agreed. So folks, Stu and I have really enjoyed these segments.
Yeah.
And so we are asking you all to help us again find, maybe there's something out there that we missed, like another segment of 3 or 4 things. Help us drive the content, and we are happy to do so.
Yeah.
And don't stop sending us dumb questions, because they also give us.
Yeah. We laugh at them.
Yeah.
But we try to answer them in a way to, not to be jerks most of the time, especially individually, one-on-one. You'll see us answer some of these things and say, you might really want to think about it this way, because you don't quite grasp. From your question, it sounds like you don't quite grasp the situation. So anyway, ask the question. Don't get offended if we tell you they're dumb questions. But I used to think there was no such thing as a dumb question, but I've been proven wrong way too many times. So
go. Keep them coming. We appreciate the support, and we will do this again.
Absolutely. Jeff, thank you so much.
Yep. Anytime.